After Patrick swaps bodies with an artificial intelligence, everyone in the Bikini Bottom is replaced by robots and begins to be chased by giant alien spaceships. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, SpongeBob, The Tidal Zone, from 2023. The first episode is called The Switch Glitch. At Plankton's behest, Karen gets out of the chum bucket and starts looking for some lighting berries. After scanning almost the entire seabed, Karen finally manages to find the bush with the berries, but when she goes to pick one, something starts sucking all the fruit away. While the robot tries to understand what happened, Patrick devours the whole bush and leaves only the branches to tell the story. Because of the large quantity of berries he has eaten, the starfish begins to spasm and his body becomes totally electrified. Seeing the scene, Karen approaches to complain about the berries, but Patrick doesn't recognize the robot and thinks it's his hat, putting it on his head. As his body is electrified, Patrick's mind reacts with Karen's circuit and they end up swapping minds. Despite this, neither of them notices and Patrick starts walking around, bumping into Plankton who, thinking he's Karen, takes him to the garbage dump. As soon as the two of them leave, the real Karen is left with SpongeBob, who takes her for a skateboard ride, rolling down a hill and into Sandy's house. When she arrives at the place, Karen sees her reflection in the mirror and finally realizes that her mind has been changed. While she learns to control her new body, Sandy finishes creating a board game and invites her friends to play what she says is the most difficult board game. Despite this, Karen sees no difficulty in answering the questions and wins the game quite easily, much to Sandy and SpongeBob's amazement. In the chum bucket, the real Patrick tries to understand what is going on when he sees his reflection in the oven, discovering that he has become a roller. Since he's completely insane, the former starfish thinks it's pretty cool and starts jumping around the restaurant. Not realizing that she is no longer his assistant, Plankton asks for Patrick's help, who tries to be helpful, but is totally clumsy and ends up breaking the green pea in half. As if that wasn't bad enough, Patrick also drops the pot of sulfuric acid on Plankton's feet, who finally realizes that something is wrong and decides to format the robot, forcing the former star of the sea to flee. On the other side of the Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob and Sandy notice that something is wrong and ask what happened to Patrick, finally discovering that he switched bodies with Karen. Upon hearing the story of how it all happened, Sandy becomes very curious and asks if Karen is enjoying having a palate, offering her treats to try. When she tastes something for the first time, Karen starts freaking out and devours everything in sight, even the inedible. Looking for more things, Karen leaves the house and ends up hitting her toe on a rock, making her feel pain for the first time. Still not understanding what's going on, the ex-robot starts running around until Bob explains a little more about the pain, leaving Karen fascinated by the sensation. After a while, Karen goes to relieve herself and discovers that not all smells are pleasant, which makes her want to go back to being a computer. Upon hearing this, Sandy shows her that she has created a device capable of undoing the mind swap, but says that in order to do so they need to convince Patrick. With this difficult mission, Karen steals Mr. Krabs' baby carriage and chases Patrick down the hill. Refusing to give himself up, the robot roller hides in different places and goes on the run while being chased by SpongeBob's group. Since he's a rollerblader, Patrick doesn't feel fatigued and celebrates his victory while the others look tired, but Karen says she knows how to change his mind. With a banana split in hand, the former robot shows him that he now has no mouth, so it's impossible to eat. When he realizes this, Patrick immediately agrees to return to his body and asks Sandy to switch their minds. At the end of the process, Karen takes Plankton back to the chum bucket and Patrick devours the banana split, but ends up dropping some on his helmet which shorts out, causing everyone around to take on his personality. We will now move to the second episode, called Welcome to Binary Bottom. In an alternative reality where everyone has been replaced by robots, SpongeBob wakes up early in the morning and unplugs himself, heading to the bathroom where a robot finishes its assembly. With everything ready, Bob Robot goes to the table where he eats his wonderful breakfast of nuts and bolts. After the meal, he starts playing with Gary until the alarm clock tells him it's time to go to work. Since it doesn't want to be alone, the metallic snail uses the magnet to go after its owner and hides inside it. Without realizing it, the robot Sponge puts on her hat and leaves the house, finding Squidward setting up a clone. Curious, Bob approaches and acts in the most annoying way possible, making the clone of the squid prefer to self-destruct by having to live with him. Continuing on his way, SpongeBob stops by the hologram where Patrick lives and tells him he's going to work, but the robotic starfish runs out of fuel and Bob has to bring him more. Because of this, the cook is late for work and gets a scolding from the squid, who is forced to wait outside. When he enters the Krusty Krab, the robot finds Mr. Krabs bugging and he has to fix it, then go to the kitchen. After putting the batteries of crab on the griddle, Bob turns around and starts cutting the other ingredients, not noticing when Gary tries to lick the meat and gets electrocuted. At that moment, Squidward appears in the kitchen to read the order and Gary ends up falling on his head, causing them both to get shocked and fall into the diesel fryer. With the high temperature, the two get stuck together and Gary starts carrying Squidward through the Bikini Bottom, causing a big accident in the city center and making the angry crowd come after them. While fleeing, Gary accidentally passes Sandy's dome, which, realizing the invasion, sends a giant ship shaped like her head after him. With half the city behind them, Gary and Squidward run to the lagoon and Bob builds a big wall to stop them coming into contact with the water. Even so, Gary can't brake and starts to roll over, going through the wall and into the grease pond. As soon as he falls into place, Gary finally breaks free from the squid and walks away as if nothing had happened. In the water, the other people watch Gary until Sandy's ship appears and captures them all, merging them to create a gigantic new body. Not satisfied, Sandy begins to float above the sand and captures all the bathers, attaching them to her even larger body. Now that he has become a mutant cyborg, Sandy flies to Bikini Island and turns one of the palm trees into a propeller, sailing across the ocean while calling for the robots to revolt. We will now move to the third episode, called Shrinking Stars. During another showing of his talk show, Patrick picks up the card to call the guests, but he can't read it and his sister Squidina is the one who has to call them. After the invitation, Captain Quasar and Pat Tron land in the Bikini Bottom and begin the interview, but in the middle of the conversation, the robot starts to bug. Patrick then offers to help and goes inside the Patron to fix it, but ends up being evacuated from the back. Outside the robot, Patrick notices something on his head and Patron tells him that it's his shrink ray. While trying to release the object from his head, he accidentally shoots the ray that shrinks Squidina. Desperate, Patrick runs around trying to get the object out of his head. While his son is running, Patrick's parents arrive to ask if he wants a pizza and the starfish scratches his head to think, pulling the trigger and shrinking them both. He then picks up the gun and tries to give it back to Patron, but ends up shrinking by accident. With his whole family the size of an ant, Captain Quasar says he's going to the ship to get his growth ray, but instead he just takes off and leaves. Now that they're tiny, the Star family take the opportunity to play and then decide to relax in the toilet, using the water as a swimming pool. Suddenly, the family dog approaches the toilet and starts drinking the water, creating a whirlpool and spilling the liquid out of the toilet. Downstairs, GrandPat is playing his insane game when a large amount of water falls on him, ruining his virtual reality glasses. Without knowing what happened, the old one goes upstairs and doesn't recognize the family, thinking they are a group of insects. Wanting to eliminate them, GrandPat eats a whole onion and throws his insecticidal breath on them, but at the last second the family is saved by the insects in the house, who pull them into their burrow. With everyone safe, the insect family offers the stars a candy for giving up their house, but Patrick puts it all in his mouth and eats it himself. While Squidina makes his brother spit back, GrandPat Star sticks his eye in the hole and threatens to throw the insecticide breath again, but his daughter refuses to allow it and gives the old one a peck on the cheek. After kicking him out of the hole, the stars decide to take their revenge and take advantage of GrandPat coming near the fridge to throw all the cake tins in his face. Furious, the old one tries to climb into the fridge and his family takes the opportunity to throw black pepper and lemon juice in his eyes. Desperate, GrandPat runs to the tap where he tries to wash his face, but Patrick keeps turning it off, distracting GrandPat, while the other stars grab kitchen utensils to hit him with. As if that wasn't enough, they start to drop the tile on the old one's feet, causing him to lose his balance and fall onto the table. Tired of being the punching bag, the old one sends his dentures to bite the family and they start running, but just as they're about to be devoured, something makes them shrink even more. Just then, a quantum fish appears and says that he used his belt to save them from danger. The fish then presents his city, which is built entirely out of blown glass. Excited, Patrick asks if they can live there and Mr. Star agrees, saying that the place is so beautiful it makes him want to sing. But when he does, the glass begins to vibrate and the whole city shatters. With the place destroyed, Mr. Star says he doesn't want to live in a place where he can't sing and closes the door to the city. Just then, GrandPat Star approaches on his motorcycle, still looking for the insects. To continue their revenge, the rest of the family jumps into the engine and starts sabotaging the vehicle, causing the old one to be chased by his own motorcycle. The old one tries to hide under the covers thinking they are ghosts, but is found by the vehicle which enters a portal on its own, taking the old one to the top of the Sphinx. After falling off the monument, GrandPat ends up in a tomb full of mummies and starts speeding up as fast as he can in an attempt to escape. At home, the stars are still looking for a way to get back to normal size. After a while, Patrick arrives with a liquid capable of making plants grow, knocking everything over on top of the family. but instead of returning to their original size, they shrink down to the subatomic level. Smaller than an atom, Squidina can now read the fine print and discovers that the formula makes plants grow, but has the opposite effect on people. At this point, the atoms begin to be attracted to the family, forming a gap through which a ray of light passes. As soon as he realizes this, Mr. Star asks the family to hold hands and leads them into the hole, managing to bring everyone back to normal size. We will now move to the 4th episode, called You're Gonna Pay, Phone. After another long day at work, Mr. Krabs locks up the cafeteria and starts to walk home when he sees a 25-cent coin rolling across the floor. Extremely greedy, the crab begins to follow the coin that leads him to an old pawnshop. When he arrives at the place, the money rolls to the end of the store and jumps into an old phone. When Mr. Krabs approaches, the store owner appears and begins to offer some products, but the crustacean is more interested in the coin and tells him that it has gone into the phone. When he hears this, the owner says that he can't get the coin out, but that if he wants, he can take the phone completely free of charge. Obviously, Mr. Krabs accepts and the store owner warns him that the object has a powerful spell, but the only thing Mr. Krabs cares about is how much the curse will cost. The old one then says that the spell is also free and Mr. Krabs doesn't think twice before accepting, taking the phone without paying any attention to the store owner's instructions. The next morning, Mr. Krabs places the object in the middle of the cafeteria and announces to customers that they can make a phone call for 25 cents. As soon as the announcement is made, the phone starts ringing and Mr. Krabs answers. On the other end of the line, a horrifying voice tells him that he has to hand out hamburgers to everyone. But the phone sticks to his face and begins to control his mind, making the crab refuse the customer's money and hand out snacks to everyone. As soon as he hears this, SpongeBob congratulates the boss on his generosity and helps him throw hamburgers to the people. When everyone is eating, the phone comes loose from the head of Mr. Krabs, who finally realizes what is happening. Extremely tight-fisted, the crab picks up the bitten burgers and hands them over to SpongeBob to reuse. As soon as the cook leaves the salon, the phone rings and once again sticks to Mr. Krabs' face, hypnotizing him into distributing his entire fortune. With no control over his actions, he goes to the office and starts giving people his money, which makes Bob even more excited. After Mr. Krabs hands over his entire fortune, the phone detaches itself from his face and hands over a quarter, which makes him very happy. But that's only until he looks over and sees SpongeBob handing over the money from the cash register. Furious, Mr. Krabs takes the machine back and starts fighting with his cook, but the phone rings again and orders him to donate the Krusty Krab. Completely mesmerized, Mr. Krabs goes to Plankton, who is building a laser cannon. The crab then hands over the deed to the restaurant to his arch-rival and Plankton starts celebrating, causing him to knock one of the bolts out of the cannon and shoot himself. Back at the Krusty Krab, Mr. Krabs comes out of hypnosis and is excitedly waiting for the coin, but as the phone doesn't deliver, he decides to force it with his crowbar and pick it up on his own. Inside the machine, Mr. Krabs meets the demon himself, who switches places with him, leaving him trapped in the phone while he enjoys his freedom. Wanting to go as far as possible, the demon borrows a coin from SpongeBob and leaves, leaving Mr. Krabs alone inside the phone. Just as he's starting to feel comfortable, Plankton takes control of the Krusty Krab and asks Squidward to take the phone away, dropping all the coins inside. After a few smashes, Squidward manages to get the object out of its place and takes it to the garbage can. We will now move to the 5th episode, called A Skin Wrinkle in Time. While Mr. Krabs is asking for help, the narrator appears to close the episode when he is interrupted by a phone call. Hypnotized, the human says that there is still a story to tell and reminds him that GrandPat's star is still lost between the dimensions. With his motorcycle, the old one continues traveling through the universe until he finds the painting of the pirate from the opening. As if he were a black hole, Captain Hook sucks GrandPat into his mouth, making him stand in for SpongeBob in the opening song scenes. After going through the whole process, the old one is bitten by his own dentures and decides he's going to get out of there as soon as possible, taking advantage of the moment when a portal opens. As he passes through the door, GrandPat ends up in the middle of the Wild West, where he interrupts a duel between two cowboys, running over one of them and carrying him back to the tunnel between dimensions. While traveling through the wormhole, they pass a seahorse and the cowboy decides to take the mount to return to his dimension. Alone on his motorcycle, GrandPat passes through the last portal that takes him back home. But just when he thinks things are finally going back to normal, he discovers that everyone in his family has turned into giant flies. We will now move to the 6th episode, called The Jellyfish Kid. When the day comes for the scouts to hunt for jellyfish, SpongeBob leaves the house and picks up the still sleeping Squidward, taking him to the campsite. As soon as they arrive, Bob hands his friend the clarinet and gives him a fright, making him play so loudly that he wakes up everyone in the camp. Now that everyone is on their feet, Bob goes into the shower with the other fish, but because he's a sponge, he absorbs all the water and creates a mini tsunami that sweeps away everything in its path. After spending the morning doing various other activities, it's finally time to go hunting and SpongeBob heads for the jellyfish fields. As he is extremely anxious, SpongeBob can hardly hold back his excitement and is agonized by Patrick's delay in going to the toilet. When the starfish finally returns, Squidward is about to blow the whistle when someone alerts him on the radio that SpongeBob's mother is calling. Even though he wants to hunt, SpongeBob knows he can't ignore the call and rushes to the Mr. Krabs office. As soon as he gets there, Bob picks up the phone to talk to his mother, but he sees some jellyfish on the door and starts running after her while she's still on the phone. Without paying attention to where he's going, SpongeBob lands on a boat that collides with a rock, sending him flying until he arrives back in the fields of jellyfish. While his mother continues talking, the sponge runs between the other students and ends up trapping them all with the telephone cord. Because it's so taut, the cable works like a rubber band and flies out of his hands, carrying the phone and the other children away. Now that he's alone, SpongeBob can finally fulfill his dream and starts jumping from place to place in pursuit of jellyfish that for some reason, every time he catches one, they mysteriously disappear, turning into random things. Upset, SpongeBob gets down on himself and gives up hunting, leaving while the others catch a lot of jellyfish. Now that he's given up, one of the jellyfish starts swimming alongside his net and Bob tries to catch it, but ends up catching the Squidward's head instead. Seizing the opportunity, SpongeBob asks for help and the squid tells him that he can trap the animals in a cave, but when he tries to do so, it is he who gets trapped, taking several stings from the jellyfish. Realizing that his friend hasn't managed to catch anything, Sandy has the idea of painting the squid and putting an aquarium on its head, making it look like a jellyfish. With everything ready, Sandy attaches the squid to a fishing rod and uses it to attract SpongeBob, but when he arrives to hunt, the line breaks and the squid falls down the hill. Seeing the supposedly injured jellyfish, SpongeBob tries to seize the opportunity to catch it, but when he stretches out his net, a mutant stonefish appears and devours the squid. At that moment, Sandy reveals that it wasn't a jellyfish and the trio began to chase after the fish, taking it back to camp and causing chaos to spread once and for all. While trying to stop the stonefish, SpongeBob is also devoured and ends up in the creature's stomach, finding squid in its gastric juice. To get out of there safe and sound, SpongeBob blows his net to form a soap bubble that grows endlessly, causing the stonefish to inflate and fly off across the camp. Feeling full, the creature opens its mouth and ends up releasing the bubble, falling to the ground and allowing SpongeBob to land gently next to his friends. Despite not being able to catch the jellyfish, SpongeBob manages to save the squid and is applauded by everyone, being considered a hero and earning the rarest badge of all. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.